after 4 o'clock. I am 2 minutes late. I apologize. We're going to get started here. This is one of those database back site. I'm recording this thing on this little camera phone here. It has a tiny little lens on it. And I mentioned to someone that the lens itself is mediocre. For 20 bucks, what are you going to get? You pay for glass. You basically pay for glass. The better glass you buy, the better lens you get. 20 bucks. I couldn't be happier with it. Because, number one, it was 20 bucks. It's only 20 bucks, and I only had 20 bucks. But the second thing was, the experience I had on this website was so much fun. It was just so much fun. And I'll show you why. Now, we're not going to cover this aspect of web development. You can take web development classes, usually from the CAS department, and they'll talk about web design and how cool that is. But I want to draw your attention to a few things that we're not going to cover. Number one is the tone of voice they have. They talk to you in a tone of voice that just makes you giggle. They treat you like you're the most awesome person on the planet, and they are just so happy to see you. The other thing they do is they have this really weird set of products, and they love how weird their products are. They love how weird their products are. And then, the thing that I really enjoy, is they have a button that says do not pull. Well, we're going to talk, when we talk about user interfaces, we're going to talk about how buttons want to be pressed. This is a doorknob. What does this doorknob want to do? This doorknob wants you to turn it. That's why it's designed that way. Buttons want to be pressed. Pencils want to write. They want to sit in your hand. These are called affordances. We'll talk about them later. This is a button that says don't touch. I love that. I love it. And what's even cooler, watch it happen. Watch it happen.
You touched it.
You click on it, and it reaches down and grabs the page and scrolls it for you. I just get a kick on that. Yeah, I'm a nerd. What can I say? And then you read the text, and it's like, woohoo! And you're just having a blast. And then this is the thing, the place I found out about this was, I was doing research in something called persuasive design. Who ate in a cafeteria recently? Just recently. And for some of them, for some of us recently, is 2 or 3 years ago.
Just today.
Yeah. Has anyone been to Sweet Tomatoes?
Yeah. My brother's girlfriend.
What's first? What's first in the line?
Salad.
The salad.
Yeah.
Why?
Because it's the cheapest.
They have the highest margins on salad. They make the most money on salad.
Okay.
Now, what's also cool about it, and why nobody gets pissed at Rotten Tomatoes, is the salad, except for the dressing, is also the healthiest part of their menu. Now, if you go to a school, like a grade school, they typically don't have salad bars because little kids sneeze in them, and it's just a disease back then. And also, it's very expensive to prepare salads. So in a school where their margins are so tight, they tend to put prepackaged foods first, and they tend to put fried foods, the bulk. And if they have a salad bar, it's towards the end, but nobody has any room left on their plate. So the question is, if you wanted kids to eat healthier, without telling them you should eat healthier, all you'd have to do is put the salad bar first. And throw away half the stuff after it gets sneezed in every day. But what happens is that most people fill up on the first thing. It's called persuasive design. If you design your tools, if you design your applications in these little subtle ways, it makes it fun and easy to do the right thing. And that's our challenge as designers, is to make it fun and easy for people to do what you want them to do. And I'll define that as the right thing. Most often you see people designing things to make it easy to make money. But these days, a good web designer, a good product designer, also looks at the larger picture. Are we being socially responsible? Are we being green? Are we doing the right thing? And the little tiny things about design make it. Well, the thing that they called my attention to in this textbook on design was this cart. This cart symbol is unhappy. It's an unhappy cart. And you think, And you don't even notice it up there. It's kind of alone by itself. It's just unhappy. It's an unhappy cart.
Well, what if you put an item in it?
What happens if you put it, now watch this, you put an item, it bounces up to the cart, and now the cart is happy, and it's green. I laughed when I bought that product. How many times have you gone to a store and laughed when you bought a product? Not often. Most of the time, especially like if you go to Fry's Electronics, it's a grind and a trial just to get through that dang store, and it's horrible to even interact with any of those people. If you, and you are all going to be making money for yourselves, if not other people, if you can make your designs make people laugh out loud when they buy your stuff, you know, I can't afford a lot of the stuff, and I don't need a lot of the stuff these people want, but I have told everyone I have met that I love this place. And I hope that if you ever have the chance to buy something from them, you have as much fun as I do. I'm not a stockholder. I don't get anything out of these people. I just like their design.
User-friendly.
Pardon me?
User-friendly.
It's more than user-friendly. It's user-delightful. And one of my board members says that's our mission as a company, is to delight the customer. It's real easy to say that. It's real hard to do. All right. Since it's a CIS class, CIS, we work at the nerd level. We work down in the guts and we figure out how things work. We'll leave the cute designs and the persuasive psychology to someone else. Now, you're the people who just have to make the thing work. So it doesn't wake you up in the middle of the night and tell you, I'm down, come fix me. So, in our last exciting episode, the web browser had sent out a call like a bat signal asking for a particular web page. What is this thing called again?
URL.
Yeah, okay. What does URL stand for? Pardon me? Uniform Resource Locator. Uniform Resource Locator. We're going to talk about why they just don't call it a file name. Because there are all sorts of different resources that a web browser needs to go find. There are three basic pieces of a web page. Three basic pieces of a web page. A web page has structure, and I'm going to lump the actual information into there. Information. It has style, and it has behavior. Structure, style, behavior. And when you are designing web pages, these all used to be messed up and spread together, and people were using structure to make it look a certain way, and they were getting out of that thing. In fact, some of your assignment, you'll see some references to inline HTML tag attributes where you can change colors and stuff like that. Nobody does that anymore. Now, having said that, you get your first job, I'm sure you will find a whole bunch of web pages that you're responsible for supporting that have a whole bunch of old style HTML in them. Over time, if you're lucky, you'll get the chance to clean all that stuff up. It's called refactoring. These days, however, if you're starting from scratch, you break this stuff up into pieces. The structure of a web page is contained in the HTML file itself. The style is separate from that. Now you can store style in there, but this is in the CSS file. What do you think that CSS stands for? Any idea? One of those S's has to mean something. Okay, I'm coming back to you. You have gotten off easy this time. Cascading style sheet. Who the heck knows what cascading means? I don't want to know. We're going to cover that next week. Yeah, it falls down. Yeah, if it falls down. Goes up, falls down. Not quite, but pretty close. Everything rolls downhill, and it ends up at the tag. This is another story. Cascading style sheet. Who here knows how to use or has ever used Microsoft Word? You use Microsoft Word? You poor people, we are together in this horror that is known as Microsoft Word. Who here has changed the font on a word in Microsoft Word? Wasn't that fun? Who here believes they can control Microsoft Word? Bend it to their will. I love that answer. Nobody ever says, I am a master at Microsoft Word. Nobody ever says that. That's another thing. You should get to the point where your customers feel like they are in control of your product. That's another story. So that stuff about styles, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about fonts. Can anyone tell me the difference between a font and a font face? But this is a random thought. Font face? A face? Font face? Okay. What does a font have? A font has the name, right? Annandale, Arial, Helvetica. That's its type name, typeface. It also has a size, 10, 12, small, big. It also has a style, right? Bold, italic, oblique. Anyone here know the difference between oblique and italic? You guys are going to love this. Doesn't matter. So fonts. What else is in here? Color. Color. What else is in here? What's the most important thing about style? White space. White space, or more traditionally, position. White space never lies. It's a neat thing. If you're a writer, you can never make a mistake between the paragraphs. No one ever marks up the space between the paragraphs and says, rewrite this. Yeah, everything else, your editor will send back. Anyway, the style comes out of here. And then finally, the behavior is JavaScript. JavaScript. Not Java, JavaScript. By behavior, I mean things like forms. Although you can get forms out of HTML, these days, typically forms are managed using JavaScript. It's been a long time since you would plug in stuff in a form and you'd hit submit, and then the whole page would change and it would come back and say, no, you made a mistake. These days on a good website, as you're typing in, the web page says, no, I need this kind of thing. Or no, your password's too weak. Or no. While you're there on the web page is interacting with you, helping you do whatever it wants you to do, helping you accomplish your goals. Those behaviors run in the web browser, and they're written in JavaScript. It used to be, only like 3 or 4 years ago, people turned JavaScript off in their web browsers because it did nothing for you, and it was a vector for viruses and other problems. These days, it is rare to find a good, useful website that doesn't require JavaScript. Like Google Maps. Google Maps is a wonderful example of JavaScript. Just an amazing set of JavaScript. We'll later on, when we're introducing ourselves to Firebug, we'll take a look at just that first Google page. So that it looks simple, but it's got some great JavaScript in it. These days, if you're a web designer, either you are going to be working hand in hand with a JavaScript programmer, or more likely, you'll be a JavaScript programmer yourself. Now, you don't have to write this stuff from scratch. Who writes anything from scratch anyway? There are some frameworks that people use. The popular one these days, it'll probably be different by the time you get around to it, is called jQuery. There are many. The issue isn't should I choose one or the other. The issue is when I walk into a job, what are they using, and how fast can I learn it. But anyway, these are called frameworks. We'll talk about frameworks when we hit programming. Anyway, let's break this stuff down. HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Who has done HTML before in here at PCC?
Not PCC, but
Before?
yeah.
Good.
Haven't we done the XHTML?
XHTML is what we're going to do in this class. Okay.
I still don't know the difference other than every line's closed.
There are only a few differences. You'll be responsible on the quizzes and the exam for knowing the difference. There's a couple of materials there. You'll have to be able to tell me the difference between XHTML and HTML. We'll go over that. Okay, let's do this quickly. So when it gets that HTML page, it's a bunch of text. That's the cool thing about HTML is you can read HTML. Now it's a little gobbledygook, it's a little jargonistic, it's very arcane, but you can figure it out. And anytime you see a web page that looks really cool and you want to learn how they did it, you just view source. You view the source of that page. You can see HTML. HTML is also a great way, if you've never done any programming before, HTML is a great way to get the experience of writing something down, handing it to a computer, and having the computer produce something else. It seems like a real simple thing, but a lot of folks, it's very new. It's like, I'm not allowed to touch the food, I can only hand recipes to the cook. And then I get to watch the cook make the cake. That's at its heart what programming is like. You don't get to actually draw on the screen. You don't do, it's not what you see is what you get. You write a recipe, you write code, and then you hand it to a piece of software and it does the work for you. Some people find that very frustrating because it's one step removed from the actual work. Some people, and I'm one of them, find it kind of magical. That you can just write down a simple thing and then this really cool thing results. Because I could not freehand in 100 different fonts. I mean, I'm pretty good at writing, but I couldn't freehand calligraphy. With HTML, you just say, I want to use, I don't know, papyrus font. Good Lord, I want to use papyrus font. And it draws this really dumb-looking font for you. And your boss comes in and says, no, we don't use papyrus, we use Comic Sans at this company. And you say, yes, boss, and you plug it in, boom, you've got something that looks like it was done by a third grader. So, the key here is, this is, for those of you who have never coded before, this is a gentle introduction to that whole way of thinking. I write something down here, and then over here, it looks different. And in your head, you're going to start making that connection between what I do here and what ends up over here. Quite frankly, some people never get that. I know some artists, very brilliant people, brilliant in their kind of intelligence, that just never get it. If they can't hold a brush with paint and paint, they don't understand how it appears. And they don't want to know. And it's working for them, and it's a good thing. I know musicians who, if they don't play it themselves, I know a guy who's a percussionist, and he makes symphonies out of glass. He literally makes symphonies out of glass. He just doesn't get programming. And it's good. He's a really cool guy. I love him to pieces. But in this profession, this is the first step. This whole idea of, I write something down here, and then I have to turn it over to something else, and then I have to go look at it over here. That's a pretty cool thing. And if that gets you excited, as you experience it more and more, then all sorts of things get to be possible. Because as you write in different languages, bigger and bigger things can happen. And in fact, in some of these languages, you write a little script, and all of a sudden, thousands of machines are running your code, and millions of people are sending you money. And none of that is readily apparent by what you wrote down in this little file. But that's the key, is that you wrote it in a little file in a language that most people don't understand. And you had to work really hard to figure out. And all of a sudden, people are sending you money. It's like, wow. Anyway, let's get started. So, the text file we're talking about has a specific structure. And it always starts with this up at the top, HTML. Oh, I'm using the old syntax. Smack me in the face and call me bad. HTML. And it always ends with what? Slash. Not the guitarist. He is a god, but he is not what we're talking about. We're talking about angle bracket slash HTML. This is the closing tag. This is the opening tag. Together, they form a container. We are going to talk about containers all the time. That's another thing about nerds, is they have a name for everything. And it doesn't really ever relate to something when you think containers. Containers have pickles in them. And what are we talking about? Two things make a container? Yes, it's a container. Don't forget that. You're responsible for knowing it. HTML is full of containers. In fact, in XHTML, everything's a container. Every tag has a closing tag. Am I lying? We'll find out. Every HTML page has two parts. What are the two parts?
Header and body.
Head and body. You can't see it here, but I am putting two spaces. Two spaces. I am indenting. Head. And here's the bottom. Head. You'll notice I mix my cases. So if I happen to draw an E like this instead of like that, just look at the size of it, cut me some slack. Also, there's no spell check in these dang things here. Anyway,
Where's
body
plus plus?
and slash body. I'm going to tell you I have a bias. You already knew that. I'm an opinionated so-and-so. Every shop you go into has an attitude around naming conventions and style. What I mean is not this style, not the fonts and colors, it's how you write code. In this class, I want to see two spaces of indentation. I don't want to see tab characters. Now at this point, half of you is like, well, who cares? But tabs, when you use Notepad++ or whatever you want, when you hit the tab key, it shouldn't insert tabs. It should insert two spaces. Okay? Doesn't matter to you now. I'll tell you about it when you turn in your assignment. So I got two spaces. The important thing is I've got one level of indentation for this thing. Now I've got a second level of indentation here. It's not semantically important. It doesn't mean anything to the computer. It helps you see. It helps you understand. So then inside the head there's usually one tag. There are a few things that are required. We won't hit that yet. But here's one tag you might see. Title. And notice that whenever I write a tag, I always write the closing tag. Even before I write the stuff that's in between. Why would I do this?
So you don't forget.
You don't forget. Now it used to be, and it's still true, that most web browsers, if you leave the tags off the bottom, the web browser doesn't care. It's not doing you any favors. Your file will not validate. And if it won't validate, you don't get the points. So, if you use a smart editor, like Dreamweaver or some other editor that knows HTML, when you type the opening tag of the container, it'll automatically supply you with the backend. I don't want you using Dreamweaver. Now, I can't tell. If Dreamweaver gives clean code and you hand in the clean code, I can't actually tell that Dreamweaver created it unless you're silly enough to leave the meta tag in there that Dreamweaver used, the little ad for Adobe. But I want you to code this up by hand. For a little bit, for a couple of weeks in the beginning of your career, you're going to go through the hassle of typing in your own closing tags. That's to embed in your head that HTML has containers with an opening and a closing tag. Just get used to it. Later on, you'll use better tools and it'll be a thing of the past. If you ever forget, it will break. In here, this is a string. Now, a string is not like a PC yarn. A string is a set of characters. Anyway, where does this title, like let's make it a little more, my website. Where does that show up when the browser renders this page? Right at the top. Up here. Usually up in the title of the thing, my website. Yep. If you've got a tab browser, it shows up in the tab. This is one example of the kind of tags you find up in the head. There's a bunch of them in there. You will need to understand the meta tag, especially around You want to write this down, UTF-8. I'll tell you why you want to know what that is. You want to know what that is. You won't validate without it. Also, I left something out.
What about UTF-8? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Write it down.
Okay.
When your page doesn't validate, the error message will have something to do with UTF-8. Figure it out.
All right. What should I write down? Yeah, on the in between the body.
It's going to be in a meta tag.
Oh, okay. So,
I don't think meta tags actually have a closer.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. So I did lie to you, didn't I? Jeez. What an unsavory character. Anyway, there's another one up here called a DTD. I'm also not going to tell you about that either, because that's in your materials. All right.
DTD?
Yeah, DTD. DTD.
And that's above everything?
I think so. I don't know. I don't know. There's so many things to remember. How's a guy supposed to remember everything? All right. Running out of time. Now this is all information about the page. It is never, except for this title thing here, it's not going to show up to the customer. We haven't gotten to a tag yet that actually displays here. All the stuff that actually shows up, all the stuff that actually gets rendered is in the body. So, sometimes you'll see something called metadata. You'll see that phrase, metadata, and then you'll have data. Now, data is information. What is metadata? Pardon me? Information about information. It's information that you're telling the browser that has to do with how you want the body rendered. You're also talking to places like Google. There's stuff in there that you put up there so that when Google comes and its spiders goes looking through your stuff, you can tell it cool things. And it's information that nobody sees that isn't a program. Programs use it, people don't see it. All right. There's a couple of tags that we'll call attention to here, and the rest we'll leave up for the interested student. The first kind of tag I want to draw your attention to is H1. What goes in an H tag? What's a header? No! No, sir. You've been doing so well up to now. Header 1 has nothing to do with fonts. Nothing to do with fonts. And that's a common misconception. A header,
That's like, isn't it the size?
pardon me?
The first thing you see above an article or?
No, well, it is the first thing you see, but it's not, it has nothing to do with the appearance or else. Ma'am.
Isn't it just blocking off that space?
Nope. Nope. All of these things are true, but have you ever read a newspaper? It seems like a stupid question, doesn't it? But every year I get more people who say, no, I never have read a newspaper. I don't read newspapers. Do you remember, did anyone ever go through like business writing where you did an outline first?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Usually, how many people in this class have diagrammed a sentence sometime in their life?
Oh, I wrote this sentence.
Diagrammed a sentence. You diagrammed a sentence? You're older than you look. Wow. Usually you can tell who's over 50 by whether they've diagrammed a sentence. Anyway, boy, has he gone far afield now? He is in the weeds. Yes. Okay, if you outline a paper, you've got layers of outline, right? Your topics or your top layer, then you've got subtopics. The topic is really the most important idea in that information. In a newspaper, it's the headline. And the stuff you put in that thing is as much, if you can, is a summary of all the information. Not so much in a paragraph like an abstract, but it's like, man eats dog. In one simple statement, it summarizes everything important. It has a specific meaning. And the H1 tag is only about meaning. It is not about font size. It's not about position.
Wouldn't that be with the tag? But if you wanted to change the font size, you could tag it in there.
No, don't do that. See, this is what HTML has been like for the last 10 years. People have used H1 tags to make big fonts. And that's not what we do anymore. So if you've done HTML before, and people said, well, I want it big, and you just threw a header tag in there, it was an easy thing to do, and lots of us did that. But from here on out, the stuff you put in a header tag and an H1 tag is the most important idea on that page, or for that section. It's the heading, it's the headline, if you will. An H2 is a subtopic.
So it's after that H1.
It's the layers of the outline. That's right. That's right. So stop thinking about headers. If you ever thought about headers as font sizes, this is the important idea. It's the top of the topic tree. An H2 is the next layer down. It's the subtopic. Remember, we're talking about structure. We're talking about structure. And here's a $7 word. We're talking about semantics. Or that is meaning. Your HTML carries the meaning of your markup. It's called semantic markup. And the hot kids who wear their skinny jeans downtown Portland in their brick-lined offices are all about semantic markup. Okay? Why bother? No human sees these tags. The human infers the importance of that line from the font size. I mean, if you look at a page, if you look at the biggest font, you think that's the important idea. That's why we make it big. That's why we make it bold. Why do I use a special tag that means a certain idea? Richard?
Because if you work with a group of programmers, you need to make sure that you're communicating the same thing with them so that they know what your program says.
Exactly. This is as much to the other programmers in the team as you. It also reflects the author's ideas. But there's something that's going on in the web that is new. And that's people like Google are spidering. A spider is a software program that fetches, it acts like a browser, but it doesn't render it, it doesn't display it. It reads a web page and it interprets it. It tries and understands the web page. And it has software algorithms that interpret these tags. And although Google doesn't publish their algorithm, people have experimented with it, and they have found that if someone is searching on the phrase, the important idea, if that's the main idea of your page gets ranked higher. Because you have told the software, this is my main idea. This is what this page is about. And Google comes along and it looks for these header tags. It doesn't care what your font size is. It doesn't know, well it knows, but it doesn't care. It's looking for what is this page is about? Why would someone come here? Yes, ma'am.
I remember back in, I think it was days when they made us put kind of like a for the page on the top. Or, sorry, I think it was my, say it was 120.
Okay.
And they basically have to put a description on the top where the title and the meta is, where it describes the page, like words that will help the person that is browsing for the page to be able to find it faster. If they want
Yes.
to find it.
Those are meta tags. There's a whole variety of meta tags that help you give keywords to the search engines. And in fact, many search engines still pay attention to those keywords. You should never omit them. But as time goes on, search engines are getting smarter, and they're starting to act more and more like humans. And they're actually reading your text, and they're trying to understand what's important about your text. The other thing that's happening, and it's still out in the future, we've been working on it for 10 or 15 years now, is something called the semantic web, where if you want to learn, if you want to know something, software will go out and look around on the web for you. I first ran into this when I talked to a guy named Pierpont. He was the head of the MIT Media Lab. I met him in the early 90s. He had a Furby, and his MIT people had ripped the Furby apart and had put a little tiny web browser in there and a little speech interface. And they gave it to kids. And the kids would say, Furby, what's blue? And Furby would go to Wikipedia, would search the web, and would find something about blue and would talk to the child and say, blue is a color, blah, 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 blah.
That's so cool.
So that software would look for those keywords. Today, and then that's why it failed, because it was the information content on the web was horrible. Now, because you folks are learning the semantic way of doing markup, these pieces of software will be able to find what you think is important. You as a human being have thought it's important, and the software will be able to interpret it. I'm beating this horse to death. I need to move on. There's one more tag in here. The P tag. What is the P tag for? Okay, so that's just the text that fits inside this topic. Paragraph tag. There's a bunch of others. There's a whole bunch of others. The thing you'll find in your first assignment is TD, TR, table. You'll get to know those really well. I'm not going to worry about them here. And then finally, about XHTML, the key here. I'm going to wrap it up here soon. What is that? What's the difference between XHTML and HTML? Well, the first thing is it's lowercase tags. That's why I'm using lowercase here. The second thing is things have to nest correctly.
Things have to what?
Nest. Things have to nest correctly. What do I mean by that? Well, here's UL. Who can tell me what UL stands for? Anyone know what UL stands for? You know it. It's on the tip of your tongue. You're thinking?
Unordered list.
Unordered list, that's right. And then here's a list element. And here's a list element. First of all, this won't validate why. None of these containers are closed. So I'm going to put a closing list element here. List item, excuse me, list item. Closing list item. Now, you don't have to, but if you put a paragraph in here, this container has to be entirely within this container. It has to nest like those Russian dolls. Now, it used to be, and in HTML it didn't matter, that you could put the closing paragraph of the closing tag of the paragraph container outside you. You could mix stuff up. And most browsers these days will still cut you slack and will still try its best to display. Your file will not validate. You have to put containers nested inside of other containers. If this container is inside this one, then it has to say that you can't do this. Again, why? Because these tags mean something. It used to be that they just made cool looking fonts, and that's all we worried about. Now it means this paragraph is an item in this list. And that's what it means. I've got a list of something. And each list item is represented by some text in a paragraph. The other thing that happens with the reason I'm beating on the semantic thing is because if you're blind, now you've got web browsers that talk to you. You point it up, you say go to Google. You say go to Wikipedia. And it does. And you say look up the color blue. And it starts talking to you about the first thing, the first header of the color blue. And you can say, go to the next section. How does it know where the next section is? it skips to the next section. It reads the HTML and it knows. You've got a web browser responding to you, talking to you as if it's a simple-minded secretary. This is going to get even further. It won't be very much longer. In fact, we've been doing this for years. If you're driving to work or you're on the bus, especially if you're driving, you can't afford to read something. There's no reason why you can't have a conversation with somebody who can talk to you about stuff. Read your email, surf the web for you. All of those software, called software agents, they can't work unless you are strict. Now this is all cool, because as you learn programming, programming is strict. You have to get the right character in the right place, or sometimes it doesn't work. If you're lucky, it doesn't work. Typically, though, it does something different, and you don't understand what's going on. Software is stupid, and you've got to get it right, every character. This is your first introduction to this. Make sure it nests correctly or it won't validate. By the end of this course, you'll have to make sure it is written exactly right or it won't run. This is why, and already you've noticed that there's some really arcane, stupid requirements in this class. This is why when I tell you to name a file a certain way, with certain capitals and certain lowercase letters, you've got to name it exactly that. Exactly that. If I say put it in the Dropbox and put it on the server, you think to yourself, why? Can you read? Doesn't he know where it is? It's because you've got to get into the habit of doing really stupid stuff, like always having a closing tag, always nesting correctly, making sure things are named the right way. Stuff that a generation from now, none of us will ever worry about.
So that's the only two things different between HTML and
There's a couple of other things. Look up in your materials. But those are the two things for today. One is that all the tags are closed,
and case sensitive.
case sensitive, they all have to nest. In fact, there's one tag, and we'll hit this again. Who knows what a BR tag is? Pardon me? Line break. In straight XHTML, you think, well, it needs a closing tag, and it does. But one of the things we're able to do now is we're able to let go of some of this extra stuff so that it ends up looking like BR / and they put the slash at the end. So some tags that aren't containers, like image tags, IMG tags, it's still just a tag. But in XHTML, it's actually just a shorthand for a container. This has to do with the language came from XML through a tortured path. Also in HTML5, they've continued this trend. So this will be useful for you in the future. Okay, so that's all I got for today. We are going to hit CSS next week on Tuesday, and then we're going to start exploring the wonders of databases. Your job next Sunday, your job for this Sunday is to get me that half you guys have already sent in the email and put it up in the discussion. You're going to get an HTML file from the assignment that is ugly. It's an HTML4. It's stupid looking. Yeah. It's intended to give you a tiny little thing that helps you. All you're going to be doing is giving me the same page, and each assignment you're going to add something to the page. If you were a software company, you'd be putting out 6 releases of your blog 6 times during the next quarter. You have to make it validate. It has to be a table. I would encourage you all to be creative. And the other thing I'm going to look for is put something meaningful in there. In some of these earlier classes, other students have put all of their notes in that file. And so when it came time for them to review for the midterm, all of their stuff was right there. If you want to tell me whether you think I'm doing a good job or not, put it in that file. I'll tell you my,
Is that journal text one?
that's the journal. By the way, again, this is the last thing I'm going to tell you today. as we remarked earlier, you guys are paying for this. And this had better be useful to you. And in that sense, I'm working for you. It's a reciprocal relationship, though. You're delivering stuff for me. I'm your customer. You're delivering assignments. You're delivering software for me. You're delivering web pages for me. If you don't like anything, if you have any feedback at all, this is my boss. His name is Scott Quinn, and he is department co-chair of the CIS department. Let him know. If you like it, you don't like it, just let him know. The thing about customer relationships is they are conversations. Everything that happens is fine. If you don't like something, it's fine. I'll certainly be upfront about what I think about what you're doing. You should feel like you can tell me what I'm doing. Halfway through the class at the midterm, we'll make that a little more formal, and I'll go through, after you've had a chance to see a couple of assignments and we've had a couple of these lectures, I'll actually ask you, what do you want me to keep doing? What do you want me to change? And every term, we do something different in that app. So think about it. You're getting something out of this. You're a customer here. Be an informed consumer and tell me what you think. That's all I got. Thank you very much.